The house was full of laughter, camera flashes, and the smell of prime rib roasting in the oven. It was our 50th wedding anniversary. Everyone was there, our 2 sons, their wives, the grandkids, even old neighbors we hadn't seen in years. They all came to celebrate Frank and Mary, the couple who made it through half a century of love. At 7:03 p.m., I stood up to give a toast. My hand trembled, not from age, but from what I knew. I looked out at the sea of smiles, all of them clueless. Mary, my wife, looked beautiful that night, just like she did when I first met her. But her smile? It was hollow. I knew what was behind it. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," I began, raising my glass. "It means the world to us. 50 years is a long time." Everyone applauded. "But sometimes," I continued, "even 50 years doesn't reveal everything about a person." The room grew quiet. "I found out 2 years ago," I said, eyes fixed on Mary. "I know everything. I've seen the texts, the bank statements, the late-night phone calls. I know about Walter." Someone gasped. My son James nearly dropped his glass. My grandson looked confused. Mary's smile faded. She tried to speak, but I raised my hand. "Don't," I said calmly. "Tonight isn't about you anymore." I walked out, leaving the stunned crowd behind. The door closed behind me, and I felt something lift off my chest. 2 years I had waited. 2 years of planning. And tonight, it began. Let me tell you how I got here. It started on a Thursday night. Mary said she was going to her book club. That wasn't unusual. What was strange was the perfume, something she never wore around the house, and the way she checked her phone every 5 minutes. I decided to follow her. She didn't go to her friend's house. She drove 20 minutes out of town and parked behind an old diner off Route 19. 10 minutes later, Walter got into her car. Walter. My old war buddy. Godfather to our son. A man I once trusted with my life. They sat in the car for 30 minutes. I couldn't see everything, but I saw enough. Enough to feel the ground shift under me. I didn't confront her that night. No. That would have been emotional. Sloppy. I decided to wait. To watch. To document. Over the next few months, I built a case stronger than any courtroom evidence. I copied text messages from her phone. I planted a small camera in the garage. I traced her bank transfers. She was giving Walter money, $300 here, $500 there. Always marked home repairs or consulting. I wasn't just going to leave her. I was going to destroy the fantasy world she built with my best friend. Brick by brick. So I called my son. James works for the FBI. Financial Crimes Division. I didn't tell him it was about his mother. I just said I needed help investigating suspicious activity involving an old acquaintance. He agreed to look into it. What he found, what I led him to find, would put Walter under federal investigation. I created a fake consulting firm in Walter's name, linked it to offshore transfers, and slowly moved the puzzle pieces into James's hands. The beauty of it? Mary helped me do it. Unknowingly. I convinced her to sign paperwork I claimed was for refinancing our retirement accounts. She signed everything. Every signature tied her to Walter's fake business. Every transfer had her name on it. I even faked having health issues. Claimed I had early-stage cancer. That softened her. Made her careless. She started spending nights away, thinking I was weak. Thinking she could finally live out the fantasy life with Walter. Tonight was the first act. I had cameras in the house. Audio recording devices planted in the living room. I even had a tracker on Walter's car. Everything was timed. At exactly 7:10 p.m., the files I prepared were automatically sent to James's encrypted work email. Walter doesn't know it yet, but by this time tomorrow, he'll be suspended. And Mary? She's tied to every document. This isn't a story about heartbreak. This is a story about justice. And it's just getting started. The night after the anniversary was quiet. Mary didn't say a word. She slept on the edge of the bed, her back to me. I lay there in the dark, eyes wide open, listening to her shallow breathing. She didn't know what I had done. Not yet. But the ground beneath her had already started to shift. I got up before dawn, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the morning light creeping through the blinds. It was time to activate Phase 2. 2 years earlier, when I first followed her to that diner off Route 19, I told myself it might be innocent. A meeting with an old friend. Maybe a talk about grief. Walter had lost his wife a few years before. But something felt wrong. The way Mary sat close to him. The way she touched his arm. I felt it in my gut, and my gut never lied. I bought a small camera the next day. One of those motion-detecting models with night vision and cloud upload. I installed it in the garage, hidden behind a shelf of paint cans. That's where she usually parked late at night when she didn't want to wake me. It took only a week to catch something. The footage showed her coming home around 11:47 p.m. She got out of the car and opened the passenger door. Walter stepped out. They didn't talk. She took his hand, and they walked into the laundry room entrance, her head resting on his shoulder. I watched that video 100 times. Not because I needed to see it, but because I needed to control the rage. Walter. He had held my children as babies. Sat at my dinner table every Thanksgiving. We'd bled together overseas, shared MIs and bullet wounds. And now he was slipping into my house like a thief. I started cataloging everything. Receipts, emails, call logs, patterns. Mary always said I was too organized. She had no idea how dangerous that made me. Then came the money. I noticed small ATM withdrawals, $200 here, $300 there, followed by transfers to Walter's account. He had a business listed as private consultant. No website. No clients. Just an LLC tied to a P.O. box in Delaware. I dug deeper. I created a fake identity using old paperwork from my military days. Built a fake consulting company and opened a bank account under the name Allied Stratagem LLC. Then I made it look like Walter's business was laundering money through mine. Every time Mary transferred funds, I added a new transaction. On paper, it looked like she and Walter were partners in a money laundering scheme. My son James wouldn't see Mom and Dad. He'd see suspects. And still, I played dumb. I kissed her goodnight. I mowed the lawn. I watched baseball with her in the living room. I cooked Sunday dinner like nothing had changed. But every smile I gave her was calculated. Every question I asked was bait. One evening, she came into the kitchen with 2 glasses of wine. I miss the old days, she said, sitting across from me. Before the boys moved away. Before all this quiet. I nodded. Yeah. Things change. She smiled, but there was a twitch in her eyes. A flicker of guilt, maybe. Or fear. I wondered what Walter had told her. Maybe he'd warned her about the look in my eyes. Maybe she was starting to realize I wasn't as clueless as she hoped. I brought up the refinancing. I told her I'd spoken with a financial advisor about restructuring our retirement funds. I needed her to sign a few documents. Just formality, I said. Lower interest rates, better protection for the kids. She didn't ask questions. She signed. Each paper was legally sound. Each signature tied her deeper to Walter's fraudulent business. She wasn't just a wife anymore. She was a co-conspirator in a federal crime. I watched her that night as she slept, wondering what she dreamed about. Walter, probably. Their little escape plan. The house by the lake they used to mention when they thought I wasn't listening. Fools. I installed an audio recorder under the couch. Just in time. 2 days later, Walter came over while I was at the hardware store. They talked in hushed tones, but the recorder caught everything. "I don't think he knows," Mary whispered. "He hasn't said a word." "He's too old to care," Walter replied. "Let him sit and rot in his chair." I clenched my jaw when I heard that. Let him rot. That was how he saw me now. A relic. A corpse still walking. Good. That was exactly what I wanted them to think. Because in 1 week, the anniversary would arrive. And I would pull the curtain back on everything. I had already scheduled the automated email. At 7:10 p.m., my son would receive everything. The shell company. The transactions. The audio. The video from the garage. I'd leave Mary exposed. Walter would lose everything. And James, well, he'd have a choice to make. I wasn't sure how he'd react. But I knew one thing. He wouldn't protect her. Not after what I was about to show him. This was no longer just about betrayal. This was about justice. And I was the executioner. James sat in his office at the bureau on a quiet Tuesday morning, sipping coffee from his stainless steel mug, when the encrypted message landed in his inbox. He noticed it right away, not because of who it was from, but because of the subject line, "Immediate review requested, financial irregularities, Walter Crane." He leaned forward, frowning. Walter Crane. The name stirred something, a familiarity he couldn't quite place at first. It wasn't until he opened the attachment that he made the connection. Walter had been a family friend for decades. Practically an uncle. Godfather to James, even. He remembered being a kid, sitting on Walter's lap during barbecues, hearing old war stories that were never meant for children. And now, Walter's name was on a report flagged for possible federal financial crimes. The file was comprehensive: suspicious bank transfers, questionable consulting contracts, offshore accounts. Every transaction was dated and cross-referenced. It was the kind of report that didn't just appear. It was curated, deliberate, and disturbingly airtight. James's instincts flared. Whoever sent this knew what they were doing. Attached to the report was a zip folder labeled Proof_1A. Inside were scanned documents bearing Walter's signature and a second signer, Mary Garrison. His mother. James stared at the name. His pulse slowed. He leaned back in his chair and let the reality sink in. He hadn't spoken to his mother in 3 days, not since the incident at the anniversary dinner when his father walked out in front of everyone after delivering that cold, precise message. "I know about Walter," Frank had said. Now this. James reached for his office phone, then stopped. He couldn't call her. Not yet. Protocol came first. He clicked through the folder and found an audio file. He hesitated, then pressed play. "He hasn't said a word," his mother's voice whispered. "He's too old to care," Walter replied. James shut the file. His hands were shaking. Meanwhile, I watched from home. My laptop was open on the kitchen table, displaying a secure backdoor I'd created months ago. A clone email account, registered under a fake name, had delivered the files precisely at 7:10 p.m. on the night of the anniversary. I could see James had opened them that morning, reviewed every document, listened to the audio. He didn't know it yet, but the real game had just begun. Mary went about her day like nothing had changed. She folded laundry, watered the plants, and called a friend to gossip about someone's divorce. She had no idea that her own son was now officially assigned to the financial crimes investigation involving her and Walter. James didn't sleep that night. He pulled case files. He called in favors. He began connecting dots that I had laid out with surgical precision. Offshore transfers traced back to a dummy corporation in Belize. Tax records showing inconsistencies. Walter's fake consulting business cross-checked with dozens of untraceable clients. And Mary's name attached to almost every transaction. But I didn't stop there. 3 days later, James received a second package. This time, delivered physically, to his home. No return address. Inside was a flash drive and a single sheet of paper with 5 words typed in bold letters. Look in the garage footage. He hesitated, then plugged it into his personal laptop. The video played. Timestamp, 11:47 p.m. His mother's car pulled into the driveway. Passenger side door opened. Walter stepped out. She took his hand. They entered the house together. James closed the laptop. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He sat there in the dark for over an hour, processing everything. The next morning, he requested permission to expand the investigation. His supervisor asked why. New evidence, James said. Ties to a broader laundering network. I believe multiple parties are involved, including someone close to the suspect. Permission granted. James came to the house 2 days later. Mary opened the door with a warm smile. James, baby, what a surprise. Can we talk? She led him into the kitchen. I was sitting at the table, reading the newspaper. I didn't look up. She offered him coffee. He refused. I'm here in an official capacity, he said. Mary's face went pale. What? There's an ongoing investigation. I can't go into detail, but your name has surfaced. I need you to answer some questions. Voluntarily. She looked at me, eyes wide. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. James pulled out a small recorder and placed it on the table. This isn't a formal interrogation, he said. But I need honesty. Mary looked between us. You think I'm part of a crime? James didn't answer. He just pressed record. For the next 20 minutes, she stumbled through vague answers and nervous deflections. Her voice trembled. She contradicted herself. James didn't react. He just took notes. When he left, she collapsed into the chair across from me. What the hell is going on? She whispered. I folded the newspaper and looked at her. You tell me. She didn't sleep that night. She sat in the living room, staring at nothing. I watched her unravel, thread by thread. And I wasn't done yet. I had one more file. One more piece of evidence that would rip away the last layer of her lie. She just didn't know when, or how, I'd use it. But she would. Soon. Very soon. Mary stopped sleeping. She began pacing at night, her slippers brushing softly against the hardwood floor. I could hear her in the hallway, back and forth, like a ghost circling its grave. She didn't think I noticed, but I did. I noticed everything. During the day, she would pretend. She watered plants, organized drawers that didn't need organizing, called relatives with empty pleasantries. But her eyes gave her away. The smile no longer reached her cheeks. And whenever the phone rang, she flinched. The walls were closing in, and she knew it. Meanwhile, I moved into phase 3. Walter still hadn't been formally charged. The bureau moved slowly, by design. But James had already flagged him internally. His financial records were frozen, and his bank was conducting an internal review. He hadn't been paid in 2 weeks. The consulting clients he used as cover stopped answering his calls. So I pushed further. I paid a visit to one of Walter's neighbors, Helen McCarthy, a retired court clerk with a fondness for gossip and coffee laced with whiskey. I told her I was worried about Walter. That I suspected he was using people. That I feared he might be manipulating someone very close to me. She nodded, her eyes gleaming. "Oh, I've seen a few strange things," she said. "He's always meeting people at odd hours. Lot of envelopes changing hands. Perfect." By the end of the day, Helen had posted a long message on the community board app about suspicious activities at Walter's address. The post gained traction. Others chimed in. Suddenly, the man who was once a respected neighbor was now the subject of whispers and side eyes. Walter called Mary the next day. I heard the conversation through the wall. "They're watching me," he said. "The bank's frozen my accounts. I can't access anything." Mary's voice cracked. "I thought you said we were safe." "We were. I don't know what changed. But someone's targeting us." Us. That one word lit a fire in my chest. I walked past the doorway just loud enough for Mary to hear my footsteps. She jumped. She whispered into the phone, "I'll call you later," and hung up. Later that afternoon, I left a stack of envelopes on the kitchen table, bank statements, financial logs, copies of signed documents. Everything tied to her name. Nothing illegal on the surface, but enough to remind her of what was buried beneath. When she saw the pile, her face turned white. "Where did you get these?" she asked. "Cleaning out the study," I said, not looking up. "Found them in your drawer." That was a lie. I had printed them myself from the secure archive I kept hidden in the garage. But the lie was part of the game. She didn't ask any more questions. She picked up the stack, took it into the bedroom, and didn't come out for 3 hours. The next morning, James returned. He was wearing his suit, badge clipped to his belt. Mary opened the door, and I could tell by her face she hadn't slept at all. "Mom," he said gently, "I need you to come with me." She didn't argue. She nodded, grabbed her coat, and walked out with him like she was going to the store. I didn't follow. I sat down, turned on the news, and waited. By noon, the house was dead quiet. I opened a drawer and pulled out the final piece of the puzzle, an unmarked USB drive. It contained a backup of all the surveillance footage. Every late-night return. Every whisper. Every kiss in the garage. I had copied it to 5 different drives, stored in 5 different places. I didn't need them yet. But I would. Across town, Mary sat in a small, beige-walled interrogation room. Not under arrest, yet. But James needed answers. And the more she spoke, the deeper she sank. "I didn't know what Walter was doing," she said. "I just signed some forms. He said they were for refinancing. That it would help us save money." "You transferred thousands of dollars from your joint accounts," James said. "To a shell company registered offshore. That's not refinancing." Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't know. I swear." James leaned back in his chair, eyes hard. "You're not stupid, Mom." She said nothing. He showed her the video. Her face crumbled. When she returned home that evening, I was in the backyard trimming the hedge. She stood silently for a long time, watching me. Finally, she said, "James thinks you set this up." I didn't turn around. "And what do you think?" She hesitated. "I don't know." "You should," I said. She went back inside. And I smiled. Because Phase 4 was about to begin. I had spent 2 years building this moment, not to catch her in the act, but to destroy every illusion she ever had. Not just about me, but about herself. I wasn't the fool she thought I was. I wasn't the old man rotting in the corner. I was the architect. And the house of lies she built? It was burning from the inside out. Walter Crane sat in the grey-walled interview room at the Bureau's regional office, sweat beading on his forehead. He tried to appear calm, but his hands betrayed him. They wouldn't stop shaking. His usual arrogant confidence had eroded. The suit he wore didn't fit right anymore. He had lost weight. Lost sleep. He looked like a man cornered by his own shadow. James entered the room with a folder in one hand and a digital recorder in the other. He didn't speak right away. He placed the folder on the table, opened it slowly, and pulled out a series of bank statements, signed contracts, and copies of wire transfers, each one more damning than the last. "I need to understand what you were doing with these accounts," James said. Walter forced a laugh. "Look, I'm a consultant. These were just routine transactions. Business as usual." James leaned forward. "Who was your client in Belize?" Walter blinked. "The account that funneled $22,000 into Allied Stratagem LLC. You listed your consulting firm as the intermediary. That's illegal if you didn't report it. And your taxes show no such income." I didn't handle that personally," Walter stammered. "My partner, she handled the paperwork." "Mary Garrison?" Silence. Walter looked down at his hands, then slowly nodded. "She thought we were just moving retirement funds around. Nothing shady." "She didn't know." "Did you?" Walter didn't answer. James let the silence linger, then stood up and turned off the recorder. "We'll be in touch," he said. As he left the room, Walter slumped forward, his composure broken. He wasn't going to prison today. But he could see the cell door closing. At home, Mary sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at a legal envelope James had dropped off. Inside were printed copies of the questions he had asked her, along with her answers. A formal statement, he had called it. She had read it 5 times already. Each word sounded more hollow than the last. "I didn't know. I just signed." Walter said it was safe. But it wasn't safe. Nothing was. And now she was under review by federal agents, tied to shell companies she had never heard of until weeks ago, with transactions she couldn't explain. She glanced toward the garage, as if expecting answers to come walking in. But the truth didn't walk. It crept. And it was everywhere. She turned to look at me, sitting in the living room, flipping through an old gardening magazine like nothing had happened. "You knew," she said. I didn't respond. "You knew this was coming. You planned it." Still, I didn't speak. "Why didn't you just leave me?" she asked. "Why not just walk away?" I looked up from the magazine, held her gaze. "Because walking away is mercy." She swallowed hard, then turned back to the papers. Later that evening, I took a short drive out to a self-storage facility just off Highway 82. I had rented a unit 6 months earlier under a false name. Inside was a climate-controlled container filled with duplicates, recordings, documents, video files, all organized and sealed in waterproof envelopes. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I retrieved a specific envelope marked Phase 5 and placed it in a locked briefcase. Time was running out, and Walter's panic would soon trigger the final collapse. That night, while Mary was in the shower, I logged into a secure cloud server I had built myself. No one could trace it. Not the Bureau. Not even James. There, I uploaded everything I had gathered, every photo, every voice recording, every transaction. Then I scheduled a timed release. If anything happened to me, an accident, a heart attack, or something more suspicious, the files would automatically be sent to 5 recipients: Ed James, a journalist friend from my old days, a family lawyer, and 2 trusted military contacts. Mary and Walter wouldn't survive the fallout. I was making sure of it. The next morning, Walter came to the house. He didn't knock. He didn't call. He just barged in like he still had some claim to it. Mary stood in the kitchen, frozen. I was in the study, but I could hear every word. "You told me you had this under control," Walter hissed. "I'm being watched. I'm being audited. My reputation's shot." "I didn't know," Mary shouted back. "You said it was safe." "We are in this together," he said, eyes wild. "If I go down, you go down too." I stepped out of the study. Walter turned toward me. "You did this," he growled. "You set me up." I looked at him calmly. "Prove it." He charged toward me. Mary screamed. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. He stopped inches from my face, chest heaving. "You think you've won?" he said. "I haven't even started." Walter turned and stormed out. Mary stood in the hallway, hands trembling. She looked at me, tears forming. "Is this what you wanted?" she asked. "To ruin us?" I walked past her, out onto the porch. "No," I said without looking back. "I wanted you to feel it. The betrayal. The silence. The trap." And now she did. Exactly as planned. By the end of the week, Walter's name was on every screen in the Bureau's Financial Crimes Division. An official inquiry had been launched, and James was no longer the only agent on the case. A full task force had been assembled. Walter was now the central figure in a suspected laundering scheme, and the evidence was growing by the hour. Mary hadn't left the house in 3 days. She moved from room to room like a ghost, silent and hollow-eyed. She barely ate. She didn't call anyone. She stopped answering texts. Her world was shrinking fast, and no one was coming to save her, not even Walter, who was too busy trying to keep himself out of federal prison. I, on the other hand, had never been more at peace. Each morning I made breakfast, sat on the porch with my coffee, and read the paper. The headlines hadn't hit yet, but I knew they were coming. I had sent an anonymous tip to a local investigative journalist named Tom Kelton, a man I once helped after a drunk driver killed his brother. He owed me. And when I handed him a copy of the offshore account ledgers, a photo of Mary and Walter entering our home late at night, and the documents tying them to the shell company, he didn't ask questions. "This is gold," he said, eyes wide. "You sure you want this public?" "I'm very sure," I replied. The article dropped the next morning. It didn't use their full names, but the identifiers were enough. Retired military engineer's wife tied to fraudulent consulting ring. FBI investigating high-profile laundering operation involving local businessmen. The community exploded. By 9 a.m., the phone was ringing non-stop. Neighbors. Church friends. Even our oldest son, Michael, who lived in Colorado and hadn't been back in 2 years. He left a voicemail. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" Mary didn't answer her phone once. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor like it had betrayed her. I stood in the doorway and watched her for a moment. "You should call your sister," I said. "She'll find out eventually. Better it come from you." Mary didn't look up. "She won't want to talk to me." "You should try anyway." That was the only conversation we had all day. Later that evening, I took a short drive downtown. The city was buzzing with quiet scandal. People didn't look me in the eye at the coffee shop. The cashier fumbled my change. A woman I'd known for 20 years crossed the street rather than say hello. Good. Let them wonder. Let the mystery tighten around their necks. I returned home just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The lights were off. Mary was in the living room, sitting in the dark. "They're going to indict him," she said as I entered. James told me. I hung my coat and took a seat across from her. "And you?" She looked up, her eyes glassy. "He said the bureau's debating it." "I'm on the edge." "Accessory. Negligence. Maybe worse." I nodded slowly. "You could have stopped this," she said. "You could have ended it quietly. Just left." "No," I said. "Quiet endings are for innocent people. You don't get that." She stood, shaky on her feet. "I never meant to hurt you." "That's not true." Her voice cracked. "I thought you didn't love me anymore." "I did," I said. "But I stopped showing it when I realized you only loved the man who didn't exist anymore." She didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The next day, Walter was arrested. James didn't call me. I watched it unfold on the news like everyone else. Local businessman Walter Crane was taken into custody on suspicion of financial fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. No mention of Mary yet, but it was only a matter of time. I sat back in my chair, feeling the gravity of the moment. For 2 years I had waited for this. For justice. For clarity. For truth. Mary stayed in the bedroom. The door remained shut. The house was silent. That night, James showed up. He didn't knock. Just walked in and sat across from me in the kitchen. "You really did this," he said. I poured him coffee. "What gave it away?" "The timing. The documents. The video files. Everything was too clean. Too convenient. You knew. From the beginning." I nodded. He took a sip, then stared at the table. "You used me." "I gave you what you needed," I said. "You just didn't know it. She's my mother. And she betrayed your father." We sat in silence. Finally, James looked up. "What happens now?" "That's up to her," I said. "I'm done." "You not going to press charges?" "No need. Her world is gone." James stood, then hesitated. "She'll probably go away for a while." Walter's finished. "But you, what are you going to do?" I smiled. "Rest." James walked out without another word. I finished my coffee, then went outside to the porch. The stars were out. The night was cool. For the first time in years, the air felt clean. And I knew. The war was almost over. But there was still one more battle left. The letter came on a Thursday morning. A formal subpoena from the Department of Justice, addressed to Mary Garrison. It arrived in a plain white envelope, hand-delivered by a courier who didn't say a word. Mary didn't open it right away. She stared at it for almost an hour, hands trembling, before finally peeling back the flap and pulling out the document. Her face didn't change as she read. Not once. But when she finished, she folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Then she walked out of the kitchen and locked herself in the bathroom for over 2 hours. I didn't knock. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. That same afternoon, I picked up my grandson, Leo, from school. He was 12, curious, clever, and painfully observant. He didn't know anything yet. The family had kept him in the dark, hoping to spare him the weight of adult mistakes. But I had decided it was time. I didn't believe in protecting people with lies. We went fishing. Same lake I used to take James to when he was a boy. We sat in silence for a while, casting lines into the still water, listening to the birds. Eventually, Leo asked, "Grandpa, why is everyone acting weird?" I looked at him, really looked at him. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "people you love make mistakes. big ones. And sometimes, pretending it didn't happen just makes things worse. He nodded, thoughtful. I pulled a small flash drive from my coat pocket and handed it to him. This is something you should watch when you're older. When you're ready. It explains everything. He took it without question. When will I be ready? When you start asking harder questions, I said. That night, I placed another copy of the flash drive into James's mailbox. He hadn't spoken to his mother since the indictment. He'd kept professional distance. But I knew that distance was eating at him. The drive contained everything: footage from the garage, the phone recordings, the forged documents, Mary's voice whispering to Walter in the dark. And a message from me. Forgiveness isn't weakness, I said in the recording. But forgetting? That's a mistake. 3 days later, Mary stood before the grand jury. Her lawyer tried to argue ignorance, manipulation, emotional distress, but the evidence was too strong. The paper trail showed involvement, regardless of intent. Her signature was on every page. Her voice on every recording. She wasn't handcuffed. Not yet. But the charges were clear: a conspiracy to defraud, aiding and abetting, and willful negligence. Her name, once respected in the community, was now a punchline. Local news ran the story with her blurred photo. Online forums dissected her voice from the audio tapes. Parents whispered when her name came up in school meetings. Church groups quietly removed her from mailing lists. She had become a ghost long before any sentence was handed down. She returned home that night, walked straight to the bedroom, and shut the door. I didn't see her until the next morning, when she came into the kitchen with a suitcase in her hand. I'm going to stay with my sister for a while, she said, barely above a whisper. I nodded. Do what you need to do. She hesitated, then looked up. Do you hate me? I met her eyes. No. I don't. Then why all of this? I stood, walked over, and gently took the suitcase from her hand. I placed it by the door. Because love without consequences isn't love, I said. It's blindness. She didn't respond. She just left. After she was gone, the house felt still. Not empty, never that. But still. Like something had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. I spent the next few days cleaning. Not just the house, but the past. I boxed old photos, removed wedding pictures from the walls, donated clothes. I didn't burn anything. I didn't destroy the memories. I just put them where they belonged, out of sight. James visited again the following week. He brought Leo with him. We barbecued in the backyard like old times. Laughed. Shared stories. No one mentioned Mary. As the sun began to set, Leo came up to me. I watched the video, he said. I paused. And? He looked older than 12 in that moment. I understand now. I nodded, unsure what else to say. Later that night, James sat across from me on the porch, sipping a beer. You did what I couldn't, he said. I did what I had to. She'll probably plead out, he added. Avoid jail time if she cooperates fully. I didn't reply. She was still my mom, he said quietly. And I was still your dad, I answered. We sat there in silence for a long time. The stars came out. A wind moved through the trees. And in that stillness, for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Real peace. But deep down, I knew. One last piece remained. And I was the only one who knew what it was. There was one thing I hadn't told anyone, not James, not the lawyer, not even the journalist I trusted with the evidence. Something that had been locked away in my safe for over a year. A document. 1 page. Signed and notarized. A confession. Not mine. Walter's. It wasn't complete. It wasn't explicit. But it was enough. He had written it late one night, months before the Bureau got involved. I had baited him into it. Made him think he needed to protect Mary. I told him I had doubts. That maybe I'd forgive her if I knew the whole truth. He drank 2 glasses of whiskey, stared at the paper for 15 minutes, then finally picked up the pen. It said, "I acknowledge that I engaged in a personal and financial relationship with Mary Garrison. I accept responsibility for the actions taken under the name of Crane Consulting LLC and understand the potential consequences. I ask that Frank find it in his heart to forgive her, for she acted out of love, not deceit." He signed it. Dated it. That was the moment I knew he had already lost. I had kept it hidden, unsure if I'd ever use it. But now that Mary was gone, her reputation in ashes, and Walter under federal investigation, I knew it was time to end it. I called James. "I need you to come by," I said. He arrived that evening, alone. No Leo this time. He walked into the study and sat down, his face tired but alert. "I thought this was over," he said. "It is," I replied. "But you deserve to see how it ends." I handed him the envelope. He opened it, read the confession once, then again. He looked up. "You had this the whole time?" I nodded. "Before any of this started." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you needed to believe the investigation was real. That your pursuit of the truth wasn't a favor to your father. It was justice." James sat in silence for a moment. This seals it," he said. "Walter goes down. Hard." I leaned back in my chair. "I know. You were never going to let her go, were you?" I shook my head. "She made her choice. I just made sure the world saw it." He stood up slowly, the paper still in his hand. "I'll file it tomorrow," he said. "They'll add it to the case file. Might expedite sentencing." "Good." He hesitated, then added, "I don't know if I admire you, or fear you." "Both is fine," I said. He gave a tired smile and left. The next morning, I went to the cemetery. Not to visit a grave. To buy a plot. I didn't want to be buried next to her. The thought of sharing that final piece of land made my stomach twist. So I bought a plot on the opposite side of the grounds. Quiet, shaded by oaks. No view of her name. No shadow of her stone. The woman behind the counter gave me a look I didn't question. I didn't care. Back home, I gathered the last of the evidence, the digital backups, the physical files, the copies of the confession. I placed them in a fireproof lockbox and sealed it. Then I drove out to the hills, where the military kept retired records in long-term storage. I handed the box to a contact, a friend from my old unit, now running logistics. "This doesn't leave the shelf until I'm dead," I said. He nodded. No questions asked. That night, I sat on the porch, listening to the wind. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel satisfaction. What I felt was control. The kind of control I hadn't had in years. Not over people, but over truth. Over memory. Over my own legacy. Mary had built her betrayal on secrets. I had dismantled it with facts. 2 weeks later, I received a letter. From Walter. Handwritten. No return address. Just a few lines. "You win. I hope it was worth it. She'll never forgive you." I read it twice. Then I burned it. Forgiveness was never the goal. This wasn't about making peace. This was about making sure the line never stood taller than the truth. And now it never would again. The call came on a Sunday afternoon. It was from a payphone, one of the few still working downtown. The voice was unmistakable, even through static and distance. "Frank," she said. "I need to see you." There was no begging. No tears. Just quiet desperation. Like someone who'd already accepted they wouldn't be forgiven, but had to ask anyway. I paused for a moment, then said, "Where?" She named a small diner off Route 19. The same one where I'd followed her that first night, 2 years ago. The place where it had all started. Fitting, I thought. I arrived 10 minutes early. Sat in the far corner booth, back to the wall. I ordered coffee. No sugar. Black. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. The woman who had once commanded a room with a smile now walked like a shadow of herself. She was thinner. Paler. Her eyes sunken from sleepless nights. But it wasn't just time or stress. It was guilt. You could see it wrapped around her like a heavy coat she couldn't take off. She slid into the seat across from me. Didn't touch the menu. "I heard about Walter," she said. I nodded. "They're offering him a deal," she added. "He might take it. Might not. I don't care anymore." "Then why call me?" She hesitated. Looked down at her hands. I needed to say it. Out loud. "To you." I waited. "I was lonely," she said. "For a long time. And you were gone. Even when you were there, you weren't." I said nothing. "You were quiet. Cold. Everything in our life was organized, managed. You built systems. You fixed things. But you stopped seeing me." I sipped my coffee. "I know that doesn't excuse it," she continued. "But it's the truth." And then Walter came around, and he listened. He made me feel seen again. A silence stretched between us. Not angry. Just vast. "I didn't plan for it to happen," she whispered. "But once it started, I couldn't stop. I didn't want to." Now she looked at me directly. There were tears in her eyes, but they didn't fall. "And when you found out?" "I thought you'd scream. Leave. Hate me." I was prepared for that. I met her eyes. "You weren't prepared for silence," I said. She nodded slowly. "You not screaming. You not raging. You didn't break anything. But you broke me." I leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "That was the point." She looked away. "I can't ask you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve it. But I needed you to hear me say it." "I heard you," I said. More silence. Then she asked the question I knew would come. "Do you still love me?" I didn't answer. Because the truth didn't need to be spoken. Not anymore. She reached into her bag and pulled out a letter. Handwritten. Folded twice. "I'm not coming back," she said. This is everything I wanted to say, but didn't know how. I took the letter and placed it in my jacket pocket. I didn't open it. Probably never would. I'm going to live with my sister. Up north. She has a guest room. No one knows me there. I nodded. She looked around the diner, like she was searching for something she'd lost years ago. Then, softly, she said, "I miss who we were." "So do I replied. "But that version of us died the night you let him into our home." She looked like she might cry then. But she didn't. Instead, she stood up. "I hope you find peace, Frank." I didn't reply. She walked out. I watched her go. Didn't follow. Didn't turn my head. Just sat there, in that same booth where it all began, and finished my coffee. That night, I returned home and walked through every room of the house. The kitchen. The bedroom. The garage. The porch. It was still. Quiet. Clean. I stopped in the living room, where the family photos used to hang. One frame remained, a picture of Leo holding a fish, grinning from ear to ear. That one I kept. Later, I lit a fire in the backyard pit. I pulled the letter from my jacket and stared at it under the stars. Then I tossed it into the flames. Watched it curl and blacken. Not out of anger. Not out of pride. But because some truths don't need a voice. Some endings don't need a final word. They just need silence. And that silence? That was my victory. Spring came early that year. The garden bloomed faster than usual, like it was in a hurry to forget the winter. The air smelled of cut grass and rain-soaked earth. Everything looked clean. New. I spent most of my mornings on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the birds return. Some days James would visit with Leo. Some days I was alone. Both were good days. The chaos had passed. The legal side wrapped up just as I expected. Walter pled guilty. Avoided trial. The deal required full cooperation, restitution, and a public admission of guilt. He'd spend years under federal supervision, barred from any financial activity, reputation in ruins. Mary avoided prison. Barely. Her lawyer negotiated a plea deal, community service, financial penalties, and a full public statement accepting responsibility. She was stripped of her remaining assets. The community she once belonged to stopped answering her calls. Her name was never mentioned again in church bulletins or fundraisers. She became a ghost. Just like she had feared. The house, though, remained the same. Mine. Every nail in the wall, every creak in the floorboard, it all belonged to me now. Not in the legal sense. In the deeper way. The way you reclaim something by surviving it. Leo started coming over more often. We'd fish. Fix things. Watch old war movies. He didn't ask about his grandmother, and I didn't bring her up. That silence between us was honest. It was earned. One afternoon, he sat beside me on the porch, quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, "Does it ever go away?" What? The feeling. Of betrayal. I looked out at the trees, their leaves flickering in the wind. No, I said. But it gets quieter. Like a scar. You stop noticing it every day. But it's still there. And some days, when the weather's right, it stings. He nodded slowly. But the important part, I added, is that you don't let it control you. You remember why it's there, and then you keep walking. He didn't say anything more. Just leaned back and looked up at the clouds. Later that night, I went through the last storage box in the attic. Inside were old letters, family photos, things from a time before any of this happened. I held each item for a moment, measured its weight in memory, then set it aside. Some I kept. Some I burned. Not out of hate. Out of necessity. I needed space for what came next. The following week, I got a call from the local vocational school. They needed someone to speak to a group of veterans transitioning into civilian careers. Talk about discipline. Structure. Purpose. I agreed. I stood in front of 25 men and women, most of them younger than my own sons. I talked about building something from nothing. About loyalty. About betrayal. Not the personal kind, but the kind that comes when systems fail you, when people you trust cut corners and disappear. Afterwards, one man approached me. You talk like someone who's been through hell, he said. I smiled. I built a house there. And burned it down myself. He laughed. But I meant it. That night, I walked through my home again. No ghosts. No secrets. Only truth. And peace. Before bed, I sat down to write one final letter. Not to Mary. Not to Walter. To myself. A man needs to remember who he is. Especially after the world tries to tell him otherwise. Especially after betrayal tries to rewrite the story. In the letter, I wrote one sentence. You are not broken. I folded it, sealed it, and placed it in the top drawer of my desk. A reminder. In the morning, I'd take Leo fishing. We'd catch nothing. We'd laugh anyway. Because life, even after all that's lost, keeps moving. And sometimes, if you fight hard enough, it moves with you.